a menacing threat to human life is re-emerging. A nuclear holocaust has been our worst fear for decades. Prophets of doom have now raised the specter of a different kind of holocaust, a swift and lethal no vaccine or drug can stop.
Plague, influenza, Ebola. The most contagious and deadly diseases in the world could be on our doorstep overnight. Would we recognize the symptoms? Can we treat the disease or even keep it from spreading? The margin of error? Zero. At stake for the medical team, their own lives, the safety of their families, and the community where they live.
Every corner of the world is now within reach. Exotic microbes can travel from the heart of Africa to New York City in a single day.
One topic dominates the news tonight. The flu pandemic sweeping the world has arrived with devastating results. 32 died today from the deadly virus, but by morning, health authorities fear that number will be in the hundreds. Thousands of people are being treated in hospital. Already, social order has broken down. There were riots at vaccination centres when stocks ran out. Gangs are roaming some inner city streets as crime goes unchecked because the virus has cut police numbers by a third. The federal government is taking unprecedented action to try to contain it.
Every single word of this news report is fiction.
Nature is experimenting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So it's a little bit of a Frankenstein-type picture that nature runs continuously. And we're never sure what the new bug is going to be. We have to be prepared for that.
Is it scaremongering? Now, some of the world's leading experts are claiming this scenario is not unrealistic. After all, it has happened once before. In 1919, soldiers returning from the trenches of the Western Front in World War I brought a killer back home with them. Some of those returning servicemen were infected with a deadly virus, a new strain of influenza that swept across the country. By the time it was over, the pandemic had killed almost 40 million people worldwide, victims of the so-called Spanish flu. Scientists say it's now just a matter of time until history repeats itself. A world authority on the 1918 flu, Professor Oxford's concern is that a human variant of the virus poses a similar imminent threat. It could kill tens of millions of people, yet only a few countries are doing anything about it.
Of 120 governments in the world, and about 15 of them have. The rest of them aren't bothering. If we don't, I think this virus could come and strike at the community, destroy our societies as we know them, create huge panic in countries.
Pandemic influenza happens when a flu virus changes so much that humans have no immunity to the new virus. Why it is such an effective killer is still a mystery. This is how it might happen.
Sorry, mate.
Just a couple of days ago, he was backpacking in Asia, a holiday ending in Thailand. On a crowded bus in Bangkok, just before returning home, he sat next to a person with bird flu. He's now infected with the same virus.
Every corner of the world is now within reach. Exotic microbes can travel from the heart of Africa to New York City in a single day.
With his every breath, millions of influenza viruses are being released and infecting others.
If one person lands in Sydney undetected and starts to spread it, I mean, every person who's infected will infect another person. You get an explosive outbreak of this completely, almost totally lethal virus. It would be terrible. I mean, people would just die like flies.
We're talking about a situation where we have a threat that we think can be a major threat, but we don't know it will ever happen. So it's like a Cold War situation. And so we're preparing for something that we don't know will happen, but it would be irresponsible not to prepare.
No one who lives through it will forget it. And so ordinary life, as we know it, will cease.
Is that the health system would be overwhelmed, with major cities and towns closing down as people avoid contact. Even the possibility of a breakdown of public order as people demand access. Then there's the damage to the economy, with a predicted collapse in world trade and travel.
This is one of the major threats to our way of life.
Scientist believes that entire cities could be wiped out. A menacing threat to human life is re-emerging.
Do an internet search for recent news coverage of pandemic or infectious disease, and you will find recent stories about a high-risk outbreak somewhere in the world. Science can identify a virus quickly, but the world remains vulnerable. Avian flu, smallpox, cholera, new strains of tuberculosis.
I don't need to point to some hypothetical disease in the future. I'll point to Zika and say we're not ready. Clearly we're not ready.
So before the patient gets here, we need to have...
There's a lot of work that needs to happen in hospitals and in public health departments to make sure we are ready for the next pandemic.
Who identifies these people? I mean, who says you can have the drug and you can't? And who's going to stop the person who hasn't got the drug murdering the person who has got it for his share of the drug? There's going to be a big black market, people who decide to sell their drugs to other people. There's going to be fake drugs on the internet, all sorts of problems.
Of antibiotics discovered in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The faucet is running dry.
And that's bad news for the public. You know, in fact, I think they should be terrified. It's taken us 12 years to get tigecycline anywhere near the mark. This makes these drugs commercially unsuccessful, and it really discourages other people from going into the field.
These are people who have already been told there's nothing that can be done for you. And it was really sort of their last chance. Not sort of, why qualify it? This was really the last chance for people who were sick with these highly resistant strains.
The lessons learned treating patients reshaped high-risk emergency medicine. Crisis passed, but a question remains. Are we ready for what comes after?
We will give government the best possible scientific advice as to which groups of people need to be protected. That becomes then a governmental decision on how to run the country.